Hey guys, and welcome back to Rain Marginal. So, let's just continue. I felt my long hair swaying in the current towards downriver. The tiny anticipation that I could have the choice to die by drowning had been denied by water only being as deep as my ankles.
もう引き返した方がいいのだろうか。
Maybe it's better if I go back, I whispered to myself, half submerged in the river. They weren't words meant to ask someone else. If anything, they were words to myself. But even if I turned back, it wouldn't be much different from continuing like this. Even if I returned to that place, it wasn't as if something would happen. It wasn't as if there was someone waiting. Just days of watching the rain again. While thinking about that, I slowly fell asleep. While sleeping face up, the river's water would sometimes cover my face. The depth was just enough that I could barely breathe. Drowning like this and dying wouldn't be that bad either. Since the day I came here, with about 100 years passing, it seems my thinking has changed a bit. It wasn't that I wanted to die, but I also didn't want to live. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of rain splashing on the water surface. Apparently, I had fallen asleep at some point. Already the world around had turned from inky darkness to white
残
rain.
念ながら溺れ死ぬことはなかったらしい。
Sadly, it seems I didn't drown and die. There wasn't any proof of that. Ultimately, it was nothing more than I was alive right now. It could have been that while sleeping, I had went from lying face up to face down, drowned and died. But there was the possibility I had soon come back to life. It was even possible I had died multiple times and came back each time. All were things I was not aware of because I had been sleeping.
まあいい。このまま進んでみよう。
Whatever. Let's try going on. Raising my submerged body with a loud splash, I stood up. Last night I had worried a bit, but I decided to once again aim for the far shore. It was simply better than watching the rain back at the shelter. It was exactly because there was nothing I could do that made me want any kind of goal at all. After that, I kept crossing the river. During the day I walked. At night, I would sleep where the water was shallow. Countless times I woke up underwater. I don't have a conscious memory of it, but I probably died sleeping at night. When I would wake up, it was just a bit difficult to
こ
breathe.
の向こう岸はどれだけ遠いのだろう。
This far shore, just how far is it? While continuing to walk with loud splashes in the river, the same whisper spilled out countless times. I had already walked for 10 days, but as always, the far shore showed no sign of
そう
appearing.
いえば
Oh, right. A question that I had once before had suddenly come to
もし
mind.
私がここにいる間に誰か新しい人が来たら
In the time I'm spending here, if someone new or if some new person were to come, what would happen? From what Lady had explained, this place's population was 1, and I was told that the person who came first would be sent back automatically. In this situation, the one who came first, of course, was myself. And it should be that there was a grace period of 3 days where 2 people could be here. If right now someone were to come, even if I turned my back to that place, I might not make it in time. Then would I automatically be sent back to the real world without meeting that
でも
person?
それならそれで構わない。
But if that happens, I don't mind. Now I wasn't afraid of being sent back to the real world. Even dying didn't bother me. If I lost my memories upon returning, then I could accept the atonement as something I couldn't change. More than that, I hated the idea of my heart changing and repenting and forgiving that God or whatever. 10 years later. 10 years after, or so I think. Having experienced countless days and nights, I don't really know the precise time. But from the occasional things broken remains from the real world that flowed in the river, I had a rough sense. And it was after coming here that I finally spoke the
もし
words.
かしたら向こう岸は存在しないのかもしれない。
It could be that the far shore doesn't exist. The thing that I had faintly sensed long ago, I finally accepted. There was no way that I wouldn't be able to get there after walking this much. I had a feeling that most likely, no matter how far I went, the far shore would never come. In a mysterious place like this, it was probably possible. I changed the direction that I had been walking. However, it wasn't simply turning back to where I came
今
from.
度は川上へと行ってみよう。
This time, let's try going upriver. Turning right, I started walking upriver. It could be that, like the far shore, it didn't exist. But with things flowing in from the real world, there must be some kind of
焦
source.
らずに行ってみよう。時間だけは無限にある。
Let's go without rushing. The only thing I have is endless amounts of time. I told myself that. Saying it another way, in this place there is nothing but time. Even with just the width of this river, I still couldn't see the other side despite walking 10 years. So I needed to prepare for more than that. Another 10 years have passed. And today also, I was continuing to walk facing the river's flow. Even after spending this much time, there was no real change in the river. However, since I had been prepared for this from the beginning, I wasn't that discouraged. Before, aft, left, and right, I couldn't see anything but water that formed the horizons. But getting lost was the one thing that wasn't possible. Because of the flow of the river, direction was the only thing I knew. Without worrying, I continued to quickly go upriver. When I think around a few years have passed, as always, there was no change in the river. But I had this feeling that I was seeing more things that flowed in from the real
も
world.
しかして上流に来たということだろうか。
Could I be coming to the head of the river? My theory might have been correct. So long as there were things that flowed in, there must be a source. Whether they fell from the sky or sprung from the ground, however they came. I had begun to think that, like the far shore, it didn't exist, so this change was heartening. 50 years later. And then, when another 50 years have passed, thinking about it, since the day I had started trying to walk upriver, close to 100 years have passed. My feet, which had been walking this entire time, finally stopped.
川の中に
A
大き
hole?
な穴が開いている。
There's a big hole in the middle of the river. Suddenly it appeared before my eyes. On the water's surface, a black hole that was just gaping open. It was as big as the room that I once lived in at the shrine. Cautiously approaching, I peered in from the edge, but it was completely dark in there and I couldn't see anything. It resembled the hole that I first came to this world from. But the one I came in from was just big enough for my own body, while this was quite
ここ
large.
から現世とつながっているのだろうか。
Is this connected to the real world? As if proving a demonstration in response to my words, the large hole in the water would occasionally spew something out. When I picked up the fragmented thing that was drifting on the
これ
current,
は食台の一部。
is this a piece of a candle stand? And it was as if it had been just used. The area where the candle would be still had warmth. There were also things that resembled wooden message strips and fragments of some unfamiliar pottery.
ここから流れてきていたのだろう。
Apparently this is where they flow from. I was talking about the things that I had been gathering from the riverside. I had thought they were destroyed while drifting, but apparently they were broken to begin with. However, looking around, there weren't any other holes, and the river's flow was still connected upriver. What should I do? I stood there
このま
thinking,
ま進んでも川の果てはないのかもしれない。
even if I continue on, there might not be a source to the river. Just like with the far shore, this place itself wasn't a world humans can comprehend. To begin with, it was also too strange to think, it took things 100 years to flow to this place. This seemed to be a good opportunity to turn back to my starting point. Thinking about it, I had started walking in the river for no reason, and 100 years had passed since I left that starting place. That essentially meant that for many years, I had continued to be struck by rain.
もう帰ろう。雨に濡れないあの場所に。
Let's go back to that place you can't get wet from rain. With a murmur, I was about to turn my heels, but then I thought of one last thing to try out.
もしここが現世とつながっているなら、
If this is connected to the real world, then couldn't I go back from here? With that thought, I slowly stretched my hand out toward the hole. It wasn't as if I wanted to return to the real world. It was just that I was afraid of how my own feelings might one day change. Even if I returned to the real world, quickly die, and the atonement were to be broken, the one thing I didn't want to do was forgive. Eventually, the hand I had stretched out disappeared into the darkness of the hole. It was then. That instant, I reflexively let out a voice like a scream, enough to surprise even myself. It had been the first loud voice I've used in decades.
手が消えてる。
My hands disappeared? The part that had entered the hole from my wrist to my fingertips had disappeared. It hadn't been cut or crushed. It had literally ceased to exist. From the arm that had lost everything beyond the wrist, there was a burning sensation of pain and strongly gushing blood. While clutching my arm from the pain, a number of thoughts came to me. I didn't care about my hand. It would be back to normal by tomorrow anyways.
それよりも、おそらくここは入り口。
More importantly, this is probably the entrance. It was a hole for only things coming in from the real world. From this side, entering wasn't possible. The wrist that had been annihilated spoke volumes about
そ
that.
して入り口があるのならば、どこかに出口もあるのも。
And if an entrance existed, then it makes sense for an exit to exist somewhere. If things constantly just appeared, then it would eventually fill up. So an opposing, annihilating exit should also exist. Turning my heels, I slowly started to walk. My next destination was decided. The lower river, downstream.
この場所からどれだけ遠いのかわからないけど。
Though I don't know just how far it is from here. If an exit were to exist, I'm sure it was downstream. At the least, I prepared myself to go beyond the distance it took to get here. A distance that took many decades of walking. 200 years later. From then, 100 years, no, 200 years had probably passed. Most likely, I had gone far beyond the place I had originally started on the river, and had come a long way downstream. As always, the river's appearance didn't change. The rain that fell from the sky had also become so natural to me that I didn't even pay any heed.
どうやらまだ私は反省していないらしい。
Looks like I'm still not sorry. Even with many years passing, there apparently hasn't been a new person coming here. The feeling that it was a good thing just barely remained. The feeling from when I first arrived, of how wretched my sister's life had been, of how I hated the gods or whatever, still probably remained. However, there was one tiny thing that
まも
changed.
なく日が落ちる。少し休もう。
It's going to get dark soon. I should rest a bit. While whispering that, I lay on my back right there. Now, the river's water didn't wet my body. Not just that, but the rain itself didn't touch my body. Even if I placed my hand in the water, when water was just about to touch my skin, I was able to repel the water.
これは戦術と呼ばれるものだろうか。
I wonder if this could be called shamanistic powers. At some point, I had become able to control water. If I touch it with my hand, I could move it freely, and even without touching it, I could repel it. And of course, I hadn't trained in order to do that. In a world that had nothing but rain and water, before I realized I was able to do
そうい
it.
えば以前にイラツメも言っていた。
That's right. Lady had said before that she wasn't a god, but something like a shaman, that she could use mysterious powers beyond human understanding. She had apparently also been here for a long time, and it could be that I was coming into similar territory. If anything in this world of rain, we had lived far beyond a human's lifespan. It was limited, but backed by an eternity of time. I was also storing up knowledge from the real
おそ
world.
らく私もすでに人にあらざるものなのだろう。
Most likely, I have also become something not human. Picking up one or two powers beyond human comprehension naturally wasn't that surprising. Because there was nothing but rain and water here, I couldn't control anything but that. But if I were in the real world, I might have been called a shaman. And from there, another few years flowed by. In the continuing rain, I suddenly came to a stop as I was running on top of the water.
あった。ようやく見つけた。
It's here! I finally found it! On the surface of the water before my eyes it appeared, a black hole that suddenly opened up. Looking at it, you could think that it was the same as the entrance that I had seen before coming here. However, back then, it had been spitting out things from the real world. But this time, in contrast, it seemed to be sucking in the things that had flowed in from the real
間
world.
違いない。これは出口だ。
There's no mistake, this is the exit! Even if it were a hole that connected to the real world, there was a huge difference in the meaning it held. And I recalled that when I carelessly put my hand in the entrance, everything past the wrist had disappeared. This time, gingerly getting closer, I peered in from the rim.
あ、人の姿が見える。
I could see people! How many years, no, centuries has it been, to see the figures of someone other than myself? Without thinking, I lay down on the edge of the river and peered in, entranced. The scene seemed to be a village somewhere. I could see the shapes of houses and children. Before, I couldn't see anything but darkness, but now I could hazily see a scene. Whether I could see because this was the exit, or whether my powers had increased. It was probably both. Thinking about it, over 500 years have passed since I came to this world. And what I saw when I peered into the hole was children happily running around. From their appearance, they seemed to be the same age as myself. While half feeling awe and excitement, I carefully stretched my hand toward the exit.
もし無事に手を入れることができれば。
If I can safely put my hand in, then I could return to the real world. I just had to put my entire body in. Seeing the figures of people being happy for the first time in centuries, I couldn't hold back the feeling of wanting to return. And plus, by now, most barriers wouldn't be much of a bother. Already, not only could I control rain and water, I could also supernaturally control my own body. I had no idea what power the gods or whatever had created this place, but by now, I might be able to keep my memory. While thinking that, I slowly stretched my hand out. With a high-pitched sound, my hand was thrown back. Just as the instant where my hand was about to touch the hole, it was as if I had been struck by an unseen wall that could go no farther.
どうして ここは出口ではないの。
Why? Isn't this the exit? Without thinking, I tried to put my hand in over and over, and each time I was thrown back. Thinking there was nothing else to be done, I threw my entire body into the hole, but it never worked. No matter what I did, everything was thrown back. I was doing nothing more than fuss around the edge of the hole. And in contrast to myself, the other things from the real world just kept being sucked into the hole. Most were things that were fragments of something, but they all disappeared into the hole without any resistance. I didn't understand the reason. Unlike that entrance from before, it made sense that this one would have allowed me to exit. And for a few days, I spent my time there. But I am all out of time for this episode, guys, so if you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!